This is June 2003, that's Prep Test 40, game number 3, questions 11 through 17. If you look online, you're going to see a lot of people complaining about this game and putting it on their top 10 list of hardest logic games of all time. I don't think it's that bad. I think the reason why people struggle with this one is that they're trying to put a square peg into a round hole. They're forcing this to be a grouping game, and it's just not a grouping game. You need to make a map to solve this game. So hopefully I'll make it look a little easier than you might think it is. Here's the rules. We have Honolulu, Montreal, Philadelphia, Toronto, Vancouver. We have to use each one of those cities at least once. Montreal we have to use exactly once. Honolulu and Toronto cannot be connected. Those rules are all fairly straightforward so far. Down here I have, if Honolulu is connected to city X, then Toronto has to also be connected to city X. I hope that makes sense. Any city that's connected to Honolulu has to also be connected to Toronto. Over here I have the contrapositive of that. If Toronto and city X are not connected, then Honolulu and city X cannot be connected. The final rule says that Philadelphia can't be connected to both Toronto and Vancouver. So if we see that Philadelphia is connected to Toronto, then it can't be connected to Vancouver. And if Philadelphia is connected to Vancouver, then it cannot be connected to Toronto. So I made a little map, and the geography of it is not really what's important, but roughly, to me, Honolulu is in the southwest, and Vancouver's in the northwest, and Philadelphia is on the east. I apologize to Canadians for not knowing whether Toronto and the relationship really between Toronto and Montreal. I have no idea which one's where. I guessed, so I put those where I put them. And then I wrote the rule in that Honolulu cannot be connected to Toronto, and I wrote the rule in that Montreal has to have exactly one connection. Now I want to take a look at the next rule. Honolulu, any city that is connected to Honolulu has to also be connected to Toronto. And it looks like if Honolulu went to Vancouver, then Vancouver could be connected to Toronto, no problem. If Honolulu went to Philadelphia, then Philadelphia could be connected to Toronto, no problem. But if Honolulu goes to Montreal, then because of this rule, Montreal would also have to go to Toronto. And that would be two connections for Montreal, which would violate this rule. And that leads to the game's biggest inference. Honolulu and Montreal cannot be connected. So to recap, because Montreal has to have exactly one connection, and because any city connected to Honolulu has to also be connected to Toronto, therefore, Honolulu and Montreal cannot be connected. If they were connected, then Montreal would have to be connected to Toronto, which would be two connections for Montreal, which would break this rule. So the game's big inference is right here. Honolulu and Montreal cannot be connected. If you made it that far, I think it's probably game over. So here's the diagram that I would have written down before I ever even looked at any of the questions. I've incorporated the game's big inference that Honolulu can't be connected to Montreal. And now when I look at the questions, I'm going to be really concerned about Honolulu because every city has to be connected somewhere, and Honolulu only has two remaining options. It can go to Vancouver, or it can go to Philadelphia, or it can go to both. And we're going to be looking at that probably every single question. So for question number 11, this list question, I can just go through the rules one at a time and eliminate answers. And I'd start with Montreal is connected with exactly one other city. It turns out that B violates that rule, so B's out. Look next for anybody who has Honolulu and Toronto connected together, which E had, so E's out. And then the rule that says any city connected with Honolulu is also connected with Toronto. That was violated by C. C also violated our big inference of the game. It had Honolulu connected to Montreal, and then Montreal was not connected to Toronto, which it would not have been able to be anyway. And then the last rule, if Philadelphia is connected with Toronto, then it can't be connected with Vancouver. D violated that rule, so D's out. A passed on all of the rules, so A is our answer for question number 11. That's the easiest type of question on the LSAT Logic Games. All you got to do is just use the rules as weapons to eliminate answer choices. Question 12 starts with the word if, and generally questions that start with the word if require you to make a new diagram. So there's a new condition that applies only to question number 12, and that new condition is Philadelphia is connected to exactly 3 cities. So what do I know about Philadelphia? Well, I know Philadelphia can't be connected to both Vancouver and Toronto. So if Philadelphia is going to connect to 3 out of the 4 cities, but it can't connect to both Vancouver and Toronto at the same time, then I guess Philadelphia has to be connected to Montreal. And I guess Philadelphia also has to be connected to Honolulu. Otherwise, there's no way I'm going to get to 3 out of the 4 cities if I can't do both Toronto and Vancouver simultaneously. Once Philadelphia is connected to Honolulu, then that triggers the rule that any city connected to Honolulu has to also be connected to Toronto. So I didn't know to begin with that Philadelphia was going to have to be connected to Toronto, but since it has to be connected to Honolulu, now it has to be connected to Toronto. That's a little bit messy, but that's the diagram that I'll use to answer question number 12. So this is everything that I know for sure for question number 12. There are still a couple areas of uncertainty. I don't know whether Honolulu connects to Vancouver or not, and I don't know whether Vancouver connects to Toronto or not. Now I'll actually read the question. It asks which one of the following could be, in this scenario, a pair of connected cities. I should be able to just identify 4 connections that will not work. A says Honolulu and Montreal. Honolulu and Montreal can't ever be connected, so A's out. B says Honolulu and Vancouver. I just said that I wasn't sure whether those were connected or not, so I think that's probably the answer. Let me see if I can get rid of C, D, and E. C says Montreal and Toronto. No, Montreal is already connected to Philadelphia, and Montreal can only be connected to one city. So Montreal, Toronto, in this scenario, is not going to work. C's out. D says Montreal and Vancouver. Same thing. Montreal's already connected to Philadelphia, so D's out. And E says Philadelphia and Vancouver. No, in this scenario, Philadelphia is already connected to Toronto, which means Philadelphia cannot be connected to Vancouver. So E's out, and I thought B was going to be the answer, and after eliminating A, C, D, and E, yep, B's my answer for question number 12. As you get better at the LSAT, you'll realize that the reason why somebody like me makes it look easy is because it actually is easy once you get good at it. Question number 13 is a great example of that. It's asking which one of the following is a pair of cities that cannot be connected, and the first answer choice, A, says Honolulu and Montreal. And we already knew that from the very beginning of the game. Honolulu and Montreal cannot be connected. So the answer for number 13 is A, and that was almost a freebie. So number 13 might have been super easy. Number 14 looks like it might be a little bit more difficult. It's asking me which one of the following could be true, and I might have to end up testing all 5 of these answer choices just to see which one will work. A says Montreal and Philadelphia are connected with each other, but neither is connected with any other city. Would it be okay to have Montreal and Philadelphia connected and then have both Montreal and Philadelphia closed? I don't see why not. I mean, if that happened, then Honolulu and Vancouver would have to be connected, which then, because any city that's connected to Honolulu has to also be connected to Toronto, that would force these guys to be connected. But I don't see anything wrong with that. So 14A looks pretty good. Just to be sure, I'll go through 14B, C, D, and E. Hopefully I can eliminate all 4 of those. So 14B is asking me if it would be permissible for Montreal and Toronto to be connected, but for neither of those cities to be connected to any other city. Montreal would love to only be connected to Toronto. The problem is Toronto has to be connected to at least one other city because, back to Honolulu, at the beginning I said that we were going to look at Honolulu quite a lot. Honolulu has to go to either Vancouver, which would force Vancouver to go to Toronto, or Honolulu has to be connected to Philadelphia, which would force Philadelphia to be connected to Toronto. So no, it's not possible for Montreal and Toronto to each be connected to just each other. So 14B is out. And I think 14C is going to be out for the exact same reason. It's asking if it's okay for Philadelphia and Toronto to be connected, but for neither to be connected to any other city. The problem is, again, where does Honolulu go? If there's only one connection for Philadelphia and one connection for Toronto that's connected to each other, then Honolulu can't go to Toronto, can't go to Montreal, so Honolulu has to go to Vancouver, which would then force Vancouver to be connected to Toronto, because any city that's connected to Honolulu has to also be connected to Toronto. And then now that violates the condition that 14C is talking about. So 14C is out. And 14D is going to be out for a very similar reason. If Philadelphia and Vancouver were connected to each other, but neither were connected to any other city, then where would Honolulu go? Honolulu now can't go to Toronto, can't go to Montreal, can't go to Vancouver, can't go to Philadelphia, can't go anywhere. So 14D is out. And 14E looks like it's out for the exact same reason that the previous questions were out. If Toronto and Vancouver were connected, but neither was connected to any other city, then Honolulu, where would Honolulu go? Honolulu can't go to Vancouver now, so Honolulu has to go to Philadelphia, but then that would force Philadelphia to be connected to Toronto, which would break the restriction for 14E. So 14E does not work, and the answer for number 14 is going to be A. Number 15 gives a new condition that says Toronto is the only city connected with Philadelphia. So I've added that to the diagram here. And this one is tricky. You need to make sure you read it really carefully and recognize that what it really means is that Philadelphia is only going to have one connection. Toronto could still have more connections, and in fact, it has to still have more connections. Philadelphia is closed. If Philadelphia is closed, then that means Honolulu and Vancouver have to be connected, and then that would force Vancouver and Toronto to be connected because, again, any city connected to Honolulu is connected to Vancouver. Any city connected to Honolulu has to also be connected to Toronto. So if H is connected to V, then V has to be connected to T. With that, I'll just run through the answer choices. It's asking which one could be true. Could I have exactly one city connected to Toronto? Well, no, because I already have two cities connected to Toronto. So that's out. B is asking if it's possible to have exactly one city connected to Vancouver. No, I already have two cities connected to Vancouver. That's out. C asks if it would be possible to have exactly two cities connected to Honolulu. The answer to that is no, because Philadelphia, remember, was closed from the very beginning. Since Honolulu can't be connected to Philadelphia, there's no way Honolulu is going to have two connections. So C's out. D says, could exactly two cities each be connected to Toronto? Right now, Toronto only has two connections, and I think that looks like it would be okay. I guess Montreal doesn't have a connection yet, but I think, I could probably connect Montreal to Vancouver. And if I did that, then I think 15D would work. So that looks pretty good. So just 15E says, could exactly four cities each be connected to Toronto? And that can't ever be true because Honolulu and Toronto can't be connected, and there's only four other cities. So E's out, and the answer for number 15 is going to be D. Number 16 asks, at most, how many pairs of cities could be connected? So I'll just start with Honolulu. Honolulu only has two options, and hey, if I'm trying to get to the maximum, I'll just go ahead and make both of those connections. So Honolulu connects to Philadelphia, and Honolulu connects to Vancouver. That's the most connections that Honolulu can ever have. and that would force Philadelphia to be connected to Toronto. It would also force Vancouver to be connected to Toronto. So we've already got 4 connections. Montreal needs to be connected somewhere, and I guess it looks like it could go to either Vancouver or Toronto or Philadelphia. It doesn't really matter for Montreal, we'll just randomly connect it to Philadelphia. So I've already got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 connections. Question is, can I do any more than that? And I might run through each one of the cities just to see if they can have any more connections. Start with Montreal, obviously not. Montreal is only going to have 1 connection, so that's it for Montreal. Honolulu, we started with Honolulu. Honolulu can only ever have 2 connections max, and it does have both of those connections, so there's 2 connections for Honolulu. So Honolulu's done, Montreal's done. Vancouver is connected to Honolulu and Toronto, that's great. Can't be connected to Montreal because Montreal already has its 1 connection, and can't be connected to Philadelphia because Philadelphia is already connected to Toronto. So there's going to be a couple connections there. Well, we already counted the Honolulu connection, so there's 1 more connection from Vancouver. And then look at Toronto and Philadelphia. I think we already counted both of Philadelphia's connections. Oh no, there's the Philadelphia-Toronto connection that we haven't counted yet. But Toronto can't ever be connected to Honolulu, and it looks like that's done. So the answer for number 16 is going to be 5, and 5 is B. So maximum number of connections looks like it's 5, and the answer for number 16 is B. Number 17 is kind of a cool question. Well, I guess I'm a nerd. That's why I think it's kind of fun to do this stuff. But it's asking you if 4 of the cities are connected with the remaining city, then what could happen? And I didn't even read the rest of that question because the important part for number 17 is to figure out which of the cities could possibly be connected to the 4 other cities. I mean, Honolulu can't be connected to all 4 of the other cities because it can't go to Toronto and it can't go to Montreal. Toronto, can't be connected to Honolulu, so that can't be connected to all 4 cities. Montreal obviously can't be connected to all 4 cities. And then remember, there was a rule that said if Philadelphia is connected to Toronto, then it can't be also connected to Vancouver. So Philadelphia also can't be the one that's connected to 4 other cities. So for number 17, it was critical that you realized that if there were a city that was connected to all 4 of the other cities, that city must be Vancouver. So here's what it would look like if Vancouver is connected to all 4 of the other cities. I'm sorry that this is a mess, but the question has actually already become trivially easy to answer. It's asking which one of the following pairs must be connected with each other, and the answer is C, because it's the only one that mentions Vancouver. The trick to this game this question was really just recognizing that Vancouver is the only city that could be connected to all 4 other cities. So I hope you found that helpful. If you need more help, I really recommend that you call me. That's my cell phone number, 415-518-0630. I live in San Francisco. Try not to call me in the middle of the night, please. But I'm a nerd about this stuff, and I really love teaching it, and I'm happy to help. So don't bang your head against the wall too much. Give me a call and let me try to make this easier for you. I have books, I have a blog, I have LSAT classes both in person and online, and I do private tutoring in person and online. So please reach out to me. I'd love to help.